Okay, let's
The
see.
broadcast is live, but no sound.
Can people in YouTube hear me? Is anybody out there? Say hi if you can hear me on YouTube. Let's see.
Can you hear me?
I hear Willie. So Willie, I hear Willie. Can you guys hear Willie? And can you guys hear me? Let's see. What does YouTube chat say?
Do you think it's my problem and because of
At
my
this point,
speakers?
yeah, because like YouTube hears me, so they hear me. So I don't know why you don't. Let me get my phone. I'll type it to you. So YouTube people can hear both of us, and I can hear you, but you can't hear me.
Oh, hold on.
It was
me. It was me. It was me.
It was me originally, but then it was you after. Okay, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, I had tried to turn off my speakers so that I wouldn't get like, voicemail and all that crap. So anyway.
Yeah, I gotta shift my chair a little. There we go.
So you're back home.
I'm back in old home temporarily.
Okay. So is my head too big in this?
It's much larger than mine because of the angle. I like it.
Okay.
You have a professional talking head set up. You got the whole depth of field thing going on.
Sure.
I like the depth of field thing you have going on. It's very professional.
Okay. And did you ever see Mork and Mindy, the TV show?
I've never seen that. No.
Oh no.
That's probably before my time.
That's when William Shatner played the giant head. And he would come on just as this giant head, and Robin Williams was Mork.
I've never seen. The only thing I've ever seen William Shatner in was Boston Legal, which was hysterical. Him and I think it was James Spader.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so I'm gonna set this up so I can record another audio copy in case this screws up. Clap for audio sync. All right, I am live here with Willie Cade to discuss a new agricultural right to repair bill that has been presented in the state of Montana. Willie, thank you for taking the time.
Oh, no. It's not the state of Montana. It was in the U.S. Senate by the senator from Montana.
See, this is an excellent reason to have this on my live channel before I edit it. Okay, we redo that. All right, today I gotta. The beginning of this video is such a fucking mess. God bless editing. Okay. All right, so today I am here live with Willie Cade to discuss a new agricultural right to repair bill that has been presented. Willie, thank you so much for taking the time.
Great. Yes, it's kind of an exciting bill. It's introduced in the U.S. Senate by Missouri's Senator John Tester, who's actually a farmer, and he actually knows firsthand the issue about right to repair. So,
this is an interesting trend that I see happening because in Nebraska you had Tom Brandt who ran against Laura Ebb, and after she laughed at the bill, and he was a farmer and is like, I'm tired of people laughing at me. I'm just going to run for office, win, and introduce this myself. And I find this kind of introduction of more ordinary, average, everyday farmers into politics to try to get something done really refreshing. It's like people are finally realizing that change is not going to happen unless they actually do it themselves.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I really like Tester. Very smart guy. He's got to have some real game being a Democrat from Montana. So I'm real pleased to have been a part of and working with his staff to make it happen.
Yeah, I believe there is somebody, it gets so confusing because there was somebody from Maryland, I think that was named Tester. So I wound up crossing the states originally. But I'm very happy to see that people that are actually farmers are getting involved and saying, like, I'm just going to run for office, I'm going to win, and then I'm going to introduce myself.
Yeah.
So what is different in this legislation in contrast to, let's say, the right to repair legislation for your average everyday consumer electronics? Like, what are the real sticking points that stick out that make this specifically for agricultural right to repair versus, normal devices?
Right. So it's important to understand that in this legislation, most of the language is around the issue of defining what each word means. So when we get to, products, we talk about agricultural products as opposed to just any consumer electronics, if you will. So that's the real important difference here. In terms of the language or the intent of the bill, very similar. And actually kind of nice. A lot of legislators have been complaining that, these bills are too broad. It would impact too many things. We don't know what the ramifications are on that. Let's just take piece by piece. And so this one is a really good bill that talks about specifics within the world of agriculture. And so you'll see some things in this bill that are like really, really specific to agriculture. And it's just how they define what the product is and what's covered and what's not.
So getting started here, a lot of this reads similar to the other right to repair bills, and where you have most of it is just the definitions and the documentation. Yeah. I want to start. Do you want to start by going over the sections that you've highlighted?
Well, let's do this. Let's jump to the fifth section in here, which is actually incredibly simple. It's like a paragraph, which is the meat of this thing. And then you'll get a sense of, you've got to define all these words and what they mean so that there's no confusion. And if you look at it, you jump over to the section, and I'm going to jump onto in my page here. It is section number 4 in this, or excuse me, section number 3 in this legislation. And it's called the requirements for the OEMs. And it just says, under fair and reasonable terms, manufacturers, or original equipment manufacturers, to be defined above, shall make available to any owner or independent repair provider any documentation, part, software, or tool required to diagnose, maintain, or repair digital electronic equipment. Period. That's like simple. Okay. Now, the first 7 pages ahead of that are all, what do all those words mean? But let's go to some of the words in here. Like they start off and define what they spend a whole page on what is an authorized service provider. Those are the guys who are already doing the work. And then they go on to something called fair and reasonable terms. I love this. And by the way, that's a whole nother, actually that's 2 pages long of how to define what is meant by fair and reasonable. But one of the things that I think is really fun in this particular bill, when they talked about documentation, they threw in there 2 little phrases. And frankly, it's one of the things I asked for them to include, and they were gracious enough to include it. It was a library of diagnosed issues. And in the agricultural world, there is a whole set of already solved problems if you have this, and this situation. And it would be enormously valuable for everybody to have access to that, because then you wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. You wouldn't have to think about it again. And then the other one that I think is probably, I'm very excited about it, is to ask for a software bill of materials. It's what are the different software components that they put together to make the whole pile of software. So typically software is called a stack. So what goes into the software stack? And this is something that the Biden administration in their recent or last summer's executive order was pushing for, which was software bill of materials. And why is that important? Well, number one, manufacturers claim that all of this software is proprietary. I think we will find out with this software bill of material that about 80 or 90% of the software that is used in this equipment is open source software that companies get for free and are responsible for providing it back free, and they don't. The other thing that makes this so important is if there are vulnerabilities discovered in a particular software segment, like the Log4j segment, which is a huge issue in the world of cybersecurity, then you will know that it exists inside your tractor or inside your combine, and then you can go and take steps to remediate the problem. Right now, there's about 270,000 pieces of equipment that are roaming around the United States farming that are sending data back to John Deere. And we have no idea if they are exposed to the Log4j vulnerability. And if they are, have they been fixed? Have they not? So this whole idea here is like gives back to the owners that information that they're going to need in order to properly maintain their equipment.
If it's found that they were using open source software and not making it back available to the community, isn't that a violation of the license of the software that they were making available in their own products?
Absolutely. That's right. And as a matter of fact, I know that John Deere has been served with a cease and desist letter by the copyright holder on particular software that they use, and John Deere is ignoring the cease and desist. Now, could you imagine if John Deere sent you or I a cease and desist and we just ignored it? What would happen? I was like, are you kidding me? That's crazy.
I mean, but who is responsible for enforcing that?
So there's a couple of organizations that are responsible for maintaining the copyrights on those. One of them is called the Software Conservancy, and then the other is the Software Freedom Foundation, I think it's called. Don't quote me on the names on that. I think I just blew it, but sorry about that, Conservancy. We just typically call them the Conservancy. And these guys work very hard to try to get it right and make sure that all of those rules are followed.
A lot of people are casting doubts on the concept of fair and reasonable terms being something that can be defined because of how subjective it is. Would you want to go over some of what it says here? Because they actually spend 2 pages defining what fair and reasonable is in an attempt to not have it be something that can easily be gotten around.
Sure. So, and this is not uncommon language in these kinds of bills. And remember, the people who drafted this language, that's what they've spent their career on doing. And it starts out with the, in general, what it means it's equivalent to the lowest cost, actual cost, for which the OEM offers the part, tool, or software to an authorized repair person, and including discounts. So it's a pretty beefy set of language here. And so I'm very excited about what they did. And then they went into some detail about it, and they went into 3 separate sections of detail about it. And I don't want to go particularly into the language and digest the language because this is not a law school class, but I am really confident that the people who've been working on this in this language have really good language, and that when it goes into court, by the way, not if, but when this bill passes and it goes into court and there's, an argument about what it really means, that it's going to be very clear to the judge or the jury sitting in on this case what was meant and what was not. And, what will happen is we'll look at an invoice that was charged by John Deere or a dealer for that particular piece of software. and they'll look at what was paid for by the dealers because they, in this legal process of discovery, they'll be able to look at those prices and they'll be able to say, yes or no, was it done or not? And, and then of course there'll be all the whining and crying about, well, we should make a profit and all those kind of things. But I'll leave that.
They could still be making a profit if they're selling something to their dealer. I sincerely doubt that when they're selling something to the dealers that they are doing it out of the kindness of their hearts at cost.
Exactly. So they're going to be fine with it. It's just that they're going to have to do it. Now, the real trick here on this whole legislation, and I think the one thing that we really need to take a look at is when you look at documentation, which is on page 5 of this. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's fair and reasonable terms for documentation.
Yeah, Part B.
Part B. One of the things that's going to be really interesting is this whole issue of John Deere having engineered the payload files with encryption. And if you really get down to the nuts and the bolts, what's the real issue here is that John Deere has encrypted these payload files, or this way that you deliver the necessary software inside the machine, so that only John Deere can create those. Not even the dealers. Let's not confuse the dealers with John Deere here. The dealers have to, every time they need a payload file, they have to go up to John Deere and get permission to create this and pass it down. And I use the word permission deliberately here so that our listeners understand that it's not just a push of the button in the dealership. It has to go through to the dealer, from the dealer to John Deere Corporate, and you have to have all the proper parameters, such as what serial number this particular request is applying to, and therefore associated who owns it. The other thing that really drives me crazy on this is, even if I buy the equipment used from you, John Deere still has control of this. So because I bought the equipment from you and because it's John Deere and because it needs a payload file, I have to go back through to John Deere to get permission for the life of the equipment. And that's going to be a really interesting issue on how they're going to deal with that. I'm sure they're going to scream bloody murder on this, that, no, this is our proprietary information and how, and all that kind of stuff. And there's technical ways to get around it. They'll whine and complain about it. But the whining and complaining is just going to be about them having to provide or having to give up their illegal activity on tying post sale. I was out walking this morning and I was thinking about, kind of doing my next show on Deer Facts. And, I like to start with a joke. So I'm going to try it out here and see if it works. Okay.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So my grandfather, with his 31 patents on the manure spreader, I know when people are throwing shit around. And by the way, this whole thing about payload files, it looks a lot like shit to me. Okay, it was a joke. Okay. Okay, we talked about software bill of materials. And really here, the whole issue about payload files, it's not referred to specifically as you have to provide payload files, but when they talk about tools, they talk about agriculture, including software or other mechanisms that provision the implement. That's what a payload file does. Programs the implement, pairs a new part, calibrates functionality, or performs any other function required to bring the implement back to fully functioning condition. Boy, that's really strong language here, and I'm very, very excited about this getting a hearing and getting passed. I think it actually has a pretty good chance of getting passed. The number of people who are in the number of U.S. senators who are interested in this bill and their staffs and the work that they're doing on it, I have a really good feeling about it. Now, that said, of course, we're about to go into an election year. Everybody's going to posture and all that kind of stuff. But this is such a well-recognized issue. It is so popular with the voters. I mean, the 74.97% of Massachusetts voters who voted for right to repair, it's just too easy. It's just too good of an issue for them to pass up. But kind of one thing I'm thinking about doing here, Lewis, is I want to change the name of it when we're talking about the issue of right to repair in agriculture, because I think it's okay to separate it from the computers and the phones and that kind of stuff. I'm going to start calling it freedom to fix. I want a freedom to fix my agricultural equipment. And what is more fundamental in our world than a freedom to fix in the United States? I mean, that's what we're all about. So I applaud Senator Tester and his staff. They've worked very hard over a number of months on this. So kudos to them, and thanks a bunch for doing that.
Is there anything in this bill that concerns you? Because when they were doing that lawsuit against John Deere, you said that there were some sections that were either hyperbolic or that left things out, and that needed to be adjusted prior to it actually going to court if it's ever going to be in front of a jury. Is there anything here that you think doesn't cover things properly or goes a little too far, or would you be happy with this being passed as is?
I would be more than happy. I'd be thrilled as is. I know the language in this bill has been gone over with a fine-tooth comb.
I'm looking at this like full functionality.
Huh?
Very nice. Yeah, I'm sorry. When I see specifically full functionality, like you're not leaving anything out, you're not making it so that you have to go to the dealer for certain things to be done. That's very specific, and it looks like they're looking to avoid any of the pitfalls that we have when working on Apple products right now.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so for me, this is like, woohoo! Christmas is come in February. Okay, yeah.
I mean, that's why I have my tree up. I can't see it with you on the screen, but my Christmas tree is there. So it literally is Christmas in February.
Good one.
So now you had selected ensuring common availability. What makes this part special?
Well, the special thing about that one is, I mean, and I'm going to go back to my grandfather's 31 patents. No device has ever come out whole and perfect and never been changed. That's why he has so many different patents on a particular subject, the manure spreader. But that's true for software too. It never comes out. So you're always iterating and iterating and iterating. And to think that, one engineer sitting in a cubicle somewhere near Moline, Illinois, is going to think up all of the solutions necessary for farmers is just, well, it's hooey. And it's not how we work. Derivative products or the next patentable idea is so important in the way we progress and get to the new things. I mean, that's why we're on iPhone 13 and soon to be on iPhone 14, because there's iterative process. You have to go step to get to it. And so that's really, really important here. And one of the things that was so interesting is if you read through my grandfather's diaries, you will see is he often went out and talked to farmers and said, what problems you're having, what works, what doesn't work. And so it becomes a collaborative process. And quite frankly, if somebody comes up with a particularly good idea and they can implement it on top of what you've already done, that's a derivative product. And that's something that we want to promote in our world. Here's a good example in agriculture. I take a look at the header of a combine. That's the thing that kind of gathers up the crops and brings it into the combine. There's a great company up in Canada called Honeybee, and they compete head to head with John Deere, and they make specific and better heads than John Deere does because they're farmers who are thinking about it and they have real skills on it. And we want, and by the way, they're in the industry, they're known as a short line manufacturer, as opposed to John Deere being a full line manufacturer. If we left everything to full line, all you would get is plain vanilla over and over and over again. And I like butter pecan. I'm really into it, you know? So that's the idea here is if you make it so constrained that nobody else can get in and work on these products, then we're going to exclude all of those creative people that could create new and better products that will come out of it.
Now, one part that I'm interested in is it says, when it comes to limitations in Section 6, it says, nothing in this act shall be construed to allow the evasion of emissions laws or copyright laws. So when it specifically comes to emissions, would you be able to steelman the opposition's argument that if this bill passes, people will be bypassing emissions laws and creating, like, I don't know, cracks in the ozone layer or something below their farm? Can you explain what it is that they're talking about? If you were as generous as possible to that argument that this would allow people to get around emissions laws, how would they do that? And how would they use any of these tools to be able to do that if they were a farmer wanted to get around emissions and just get rid of these systems? Because I've heard people say that the systems inside the tractor that deal with emissions, they break down constantly and they're a pain in the ass. So there is an incentive structure there for people to say, screw it, I don't want this shit inside my tractor. I don't care if there's a cloud above it, go away.
So let me distinguish between repairing something back to full functionality, i.e. the way it was designed, which includes all of the legal requirements that you have, versus doing something illegal. And that's really what they're trying to say here in this language is we're still going to, this bill doesn't say you can do things illegally now that you can repair it. It just says that repairing it is okay and it's not a part of that. Now, one of the interesting things is if you look at this whole issue of repairing, the Copyright Office has actually said, yeah, from time to time when you're repairing this equipment or when you're trying to understand what the problem is with emissions, you have to shut off some of that capability in order to do it. And that's perfectly appropriate. That's the right thing to do when you're repairing. All you need to do is put it back in the eco mode, if you will, once you're done repairing. Now, I understand that John Deere wants to be, and by the way, it's hard for me to be generous to them, but I'm going to try right about now. I understand they want to be a good corporate citizen and have people following the laws. But that's the owner's responsibility. That's not John Deere's responsibility.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And it doesn't give the right to John Deere to say, we can control whatever we want on your repairing because of you might someday do something wrong.
Because I 110% believe that everything that they're doing because of money, and they're doing to keep the repair revenue coming in. I don't believe they're doing this because they care about the climate or they want to be a good corporate citizen. I believe all of that is bullshit. But I'm trying to understand the argument at the very least so I understand how to respond to it. I've read some of my YouTube comments and I could see, like, I could understand if certain people in my YouTube comments use the system to, if there was any sort of way to simply run the tractor not in eco mode and say, screw it, I don't want to deal with fixing the emission system. I'm just going to disable it. Like for instance, in New York City, there are, because of the population density, there are inspectors that just go around, they walk to each business, they find some way to misinterpret the law, and then fine you. and because it's a great way for the city to bring in lots of revenue, and they do it every year, and I document it on this channel. And whereas, if you're talking about rural Nebraska or Montana, I don't imagine, even if it is technically illegal, it kind of reminds me of when they say it's a federal crime to steal mail from your neighbor's mailbox. It's like, who's gonna see it? Like, who's gonna know that you did that? It's a federal crime, but if you're in the middle of a farm in Montana or Nebraska, like, what are the chances? The EPA is not sending somebody out during every time of the year to see, like, is there a cloud above your farm or something? Like, so would it be possible for somebody to actually, I still think you should have the freedom to fix your own stuff, regardless of whether you're modifying something in this way, even if I don't want you to modify it in that way. But would somebody be able to just tell their tractor, run in dirty mode if they had access to this, or would you not have access to that as a result of this? Like, are they going to be parsing it out in a way where you would not be able to run your tractor without the emissions stuff working if you had access to everything you needed to fix the emissions equipment?
So, complicated question, actually.
Technically, if I want to be a piece of shit, what I'm asking is, if I wanted to be a piece of shit and run it without it, would I be able to do that with this software that I could get access to from this bill?
No, because it's in repair mode and you're repairing it. Now, by the way, if you can, shame on you, John Deere, for creating a piece of software that easy to circumvent. I think what you'd really have to be able to do is you'd have to go out and reprogram it. And yeah, there's some people out there who have done it and they're smart enough and that can do it. And yeah, that's a pain in the ass, but it's illegal. So can I have 100% assurance that people won't violate the law? No. Well, the only way to do it is just to let John Deere be the judge and jury in this. And I'm not convinced that that's a good thing for our economy.
I think that that's a horrible thing for the economy. I'm just trying to understand in the most generous possible terms what their argument is, because it makes it easier to poke holes in it later and to go over it if I understand where they're coming from. So I think where they're coming from is there's no way in hell that we can actually tell if you're going to do the right thing. There's no way that we're going to be able to send out some EPA investigator to every single farm in the United States at all, every single time, to make sure you're not doing something illegal. And because it is insanely difficult to enforce this law, we're simply going to make it impossible for there to ever be a possibility of you ever even doing anything illegal by locking down the whole system. So, like, right. I don't want to live in that world. Screw that. But I'm trying to at least understand where they're coming from, so it's easier for me to create an argument against it in the future. So you're saying that the tractor would be in repair mode, so you wouldn't really be able to use it for your primary day-to-day activity while it is in that mode, while the emission stuff is not activated.
It should be, and if they haven't programmed it that way, shame on John Deere. They should be able to do that. That's just a simple decision, if statement to put into their program. Now, I know I'm going to get some pushbacks from some engineer somewhere. You don't know how complicated these programs are. It's like, yeah, okay. But if you really want to go down the road that way, invest in the programming necessary to make that happen.
I agree. I mean, if they're that concerned about safety rather than, or that concerned about emissions, then rather than locking you out of the entire ability to actually work on your own product, make it so that it'll work like this for a specific section of time. You can use it without these systems for a certain period. You can, if you want to use these features of the tractor, this thing must be working. Like, I think there are many ways to go about it without simply disabling it altogether. Like, for instance, Tesla with autopilot, they give you autopilot, but you have to be paying attention. There's this one kid on Twitter that hacked into their system. He hasn't gotten around it, but it actually shows you in real time what the car thinks you're doing, because there's a little camera in there. So, like, it'll tell, like, the percentage that you're looking at your phone, if you're looking at all sorts of crazy stuff that I think is most likely 10 times more difficult to actually program than just don't run the tractor in the mode that you want to run it in to actually run your farm if you have it in repair mode, which is the way that the emission systems won't work. I agree with you there. I mainly just wanted to understand what their argument is so that I could at least kind of respond, like come up with a better response to it than you're wrong when speaking to a legislator.
Good. Yeah. So, and if any of your listeners want to get into down and dirty detail about what a payload file is, come on over to DeerFacts. I've got a nice video on it, and hopefully I can give you a good conceptual understanding of what that is, and you can start to use it in your arguments.
Fantasy novel says a diagnostic and repair mode should have a time limit 30 minutes then 3-hour cooldown. No point in running dirty then.
There you go.
Okay. Now, I believe there was a state senator in Montana a while back that presented a bill. I forget his name. I don't know if you remember off the top of your head. That presented a right to repair bill. Said the bill was asking for certain things, and that's why he didn't like it. But it was his own bill. He presented it, and that actually wasn't written in the bill.
Yeah.
That was a few months ago, and I just looked through this and went like, "What the hell? What happened with that?"
I've lost track of it too, Lewis. I know what you're talking about, and I'm getting it mixed up with other bills and other sponsors, etc. So, but that's part of the fun of this process is that there's so many bills out there right now. It's really hard to keep track of them. I mean, I think right now there's 11 states that have ag only bills. And I think there's a new one coming up in Illinois, and oh my gosh, that is industry specific. So there's lots of stuff going on.
Now I found which one this is. This was let's see.
You're killing me here, Lewis, with the dead air.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So it was Senator Ryan Asmundson who had said, I dropped the bill, and it brought a lot of folks out that were concerned about it, and rightfully so. And all the things that he said that the bill was asking for were not actually asking for. So I'm glad to see that somebody from Montana got some sense and decided to introduce something federally.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the ways that the manufacturers are kind of fighting against this. They're setting up what we call FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And my number 3 episode is going to be all about that and use specific examples so that when people start to hear the people talk about that, they can go, wait a minute. Wait, that's just FUD. And I'm not talking about mud. I mean FUD.
What's the difference between mud and FUD?
Mud as an agricultural thing, FUD being fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It was a joke. Come on, Lewis. If I got to explain a joke, man.
So when it comes to documentation, is John Deere actually able to provide a library of diagnosed issues? I get software bill of materials, at least with Apple products. I mean, one thing that I go over on my channel regularly is they don't even know the common issues in their own products. Like, we figure them out years before they do in their own recall programs. Does John Deere actually keep a list of known issues to make it easier for people to diagnose what's going on with their devices?
Absolutely. And it's a very rich library, and people in the know would really like to have access to that information. I mean, when you think about it, wait a minute. The way they got this was it was a piece of equipment that went out and somebody else owns it, and they paid for the repair. So why is it that John Deere is the only one that gets to use this? And by the way, I'm sure John Deere, we have the people who did it. And I said, wait, you already got paid for it. You got paid by the $150 to $180 an hour service charge that you caused, or that you charged for the repair. If you're really committed to people repairing their own equipment, you'll start giving them the tools necessary to do it. By the way, we got to do another show on repair manuals. You're going to love some of the data that I pulled out on that one. It's hilarious.
So where do people find your show if they want to learn more? Where's Deer Facts?
Deer Facts. It's a YouTube channel just called Deer Facts. DEE double E-R-E facts, F-A-C-T-S. So, and we're putting up an episode about once a week now. And I've had phenomenal comments from people, just and great information. So come on over and leave me your comments. I've even had some, some not nice ones, but that's okay. It's the internet. That happens.
That's the way that you know that they're real and that your YouTube channel is working, when people start shitting on it when you have 5 subscribers.
Right. Yep.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Louis, always good to chat with you. Okay. And I promise I'll send you over the statistics on the repair manual. I think you're going to have a gasp of it.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. You have a lovely day.
Bye-bye.